Okay, here we are. We're on the eve of Gimmel of the month of the Rebbe's Histalkus, Gimmel Tammuz. And so this maymor, which I've chosen, is a maymor that probably a lot of people choose to read and learn, because this is the last maymor that the Rebbe personally edited, Magia, he personally edited this, and it was the last maymor that he personally distributed. So in a sense, this is the Rebbe putting in our hands a very fundamental teaching. And really, the maymor is really about what is a Rebbe. Using Moshe Rabbeinu, whose name is Rebbe, our Rebbe, right? And we know from Kabbalah, it says, Ispashtusud Moshe Rabbeinu b'kol dor v'dor. There's a flow, a hispashtus, a flow of Moshe Rabbeinu in each generation, who is in the embodiment of the Tzaddik Hador. So, let us begin. I don't know if any of you are looking at the text, but if you are, and you have issues or questions, please come off mute and let's deal with them as we go. Okay? Okay. So this maymor begins with a pasuk in Shmos. Ve'ato tetzava. It says, you, Moshe, God is commanding you, Moshe, to speak to tzaveh, to command, es bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. And what is the command? Ve'yichu elecho shemen zayis. Tell, God says to Moshe, tell the Jewish people that they should take to you, or in English we say bring to you, but the word is take, which will play some relevance later. Take to you shemen zayis zach. Oil, which is olive oil, shemen zayis, zach, which is very pure. And not only does it have to be pure, but it has to be kosis lemoer. It has to be beaten. It has to be squeezed until the pure drop of oil comes out of it in order for it to radiate. Now, the oil could be used, not every oil that you buy off the shelf is kosis lemoer. So all these words are going to become very, very important in terms of understanding what it is that a Rebbe is, Moshe Rabbeinu, what it is that our role is in relation to the Rebbe, and what's the role of the circumstances in which we live that color and qualify the relationship between us and the Rebbe. As I said, for people who didn't come on earlier, this is the last maymor that the Rebbe edited, and maymor came out in two respects. One, they were either just recorded at the time that they were said by the chayzrim, the people who repeated amongst themselves, and some of them were given out that way, but many of them, and the ones that we mostly like to deal with, because they're magia by the Rebbe himself. The Rebbe went over them and made changes to them. He said it, they recorded it, and then they made changes. So this is the last maymor that the Rebbe personally edited, and it's the last maymor that he personally distributed it to us Hasidim. So as I said earlier, it's basically he's handing himself to us in this maymor. The maymor focuses on Moshe Rabbeinu, and I mentioned before the line from the Zohar that Ispashtusha the Moshe Rabbeinu b'chol dor v'dor, that the tzaddik of each and every generation receives the flow from Moshe Rabbeinu. Just like we all have a nefesh elokis that flows from the highest levels of godliness and disperses throughout all of us, so the level, the darga, the personality, the soul of the tzaddik is mashpia into the tzaddikim, and particularly the tzaddik hador. So we're starting here with a pasuk where God says to Moshe that he should command the children of Israel that they should take to you, meaning to Moshe, bring to you, shemen zayis zah, olive oil, very pure, kashtis lemoy, which is crushed in order to irradiate. Lahalos ner tomid, and that will be excuse me, the offering of the light, the candles, the neros in the Beis Hamikdash, the ner tamid that should burn continually. Okay, so the Rebbe is now going to, remember, the Rebbe is maymor about a Rebbe. It's particularly going to be focused on the Frierdiker Rebbe, who passed away. And this is also, he becomes the Rebbe that the Rebbe is speaking about. So it's known, there are a lot of fine points in this, which are known, and he's going to bring them out. One of them, first one, is the following. In all the commandments that God gave to Moses in the Torah, they begin by God saying, Tzav es bnei Yisrael, command the children of Israel. And here it says, V'kan nemar, ve'ato tetzaver, you should command es bnei Yisrael. Question number one, why that change of language from all the other places when Hashem commands Moses? And in addition, the idea of this particular detail that it says you should command, it's not just a grammatical thing, it's something that expresses a particular meaning. The lashon da'ato tetzava, when it says you should command, mashma, that implies Moshe Rabbeinu hu mitzaveh, that he is the one that's commanding. In other words, when God says to Moses, Tzav es bnei Yisrael, it's clear that he's saying that I'm giving a commandment and you're the intermediary, that you're the one who's giving it over. We're here with the emphasis, what the Rebbe is saying, with the emphasis on you. This is something that I'm telling you to give you yourself over to the children of Israel. And that's why it says, Ato tetzava. The hadith is that Ato tetzava, you should command. Lo rak b'haloshen ela gam b'hatoikin. So the toikin is the meaning. The meaning is that he should be doing the command. It's sort of lahavin. And we need to understand here. Hare Moshe who has shliach. Moshe doesn't do anything on his own, but this pasuk implies that he is. Ato, you. Moshe doesn't do anything on his own. He's a shliach. He's a messenger. Limser Yisrael as it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to give over to the Jewish people that which God has commanded, not which Ator, which you have commanded, which Moshe has been commanded the Moshe to give over to you. It says at first glance, Kiven shahalos haneros hoise agide Aaron. This is not next question. Question number 3, I think, if we've been following the number of questions. This is an unusual thing. Since the lighting of the light, who lit the lights in the temple? When we learned about the menorah, Aaron, the priest, was given the gift. After all the Nesiim brought their gifts, Aaron felt bad, and he was given a gift, that you are the ones who should illuminate with holiness the whole temple. Aaron. So Gam Tzorech Lahavin, why is God commanding you, God and Moshe, to tell the Jewish people to bring the oil to him, to Moshe? Why is the commandment to bring the oil to Moshe? To you. At first glance, since the elevation, literally, it means to light up the lights, but it means to raise up the lights. They should come from below to above and rise up. So since that was done by Aaron HaKohen, so why did the oil have to be brought to Moshe? Next question. Gam Tzorech Lahavin, we have to also understand much of shemen hasis lamoya. It has to be crushed in order to irradiate, to shine, to illuminate. Shemen, it could have said and should have said, shemen laoyer. This is just oil that will illuminate, because that's what oil does. When you put oil, any oil, olive oil, right? It doesn't have to be kosis lamoyer. You don't have to go to the extra step of making sure that it's ground in a very refined way. You could take any olive oil, put it on a wick, and it'll light. So what's that? What's the purpose of those sort of extra words? That's question number 4, and I think this is number 5. Gam sorek lahavin. In the pasuk, it's the pasuk afterwards. It says, "Nema me'erev ad boike." Right afterwards, it says this light is going to shine from evening until morning, and here it says lahalos ne'tomir, that it's a continual. So what is it? Is it something from day to night with an interruption, or is it an ner tomid, or maybe this particular light that comes with that's with a crushedness? It's crushed in order to, maybe this is a special thing that creates something different from the ordinary light, in that it's continual. All right, those are the 5 questions, and we will now begin to explain them. Do you have any questions on the questions? Okay. Umevar Kobi Kadosh is Marikami. So the Frierdiker Rebbe, my father-in-law, the Rebbe is speaking, the Frierdiker Rebbe, my father-in-law, he explained, in parentheses, maymor hayedua, he explained that he explained in his known maymor. The maymor, this is a Purim maymor. This is a rather famous, it's hard to say that one maymor is, but this is a famous, oft-learned maymor from the Frierdiker Rebbe on Purim. About Purim, what does it say? It says in the Megillah, the Kibbel HaYehudim, that at the time of Purim, the Yidden were makabel, they received. And the explanation of that given by Chazal, not just in Chassidus, but by the sages, is that which was started at Mount Sinai, where they heard the voices, they heard and they saw the voices, and they heard the sounds, and the light show that was going on there, the synesthesia, the blending of 2 senses in a way that wasn't normal. What happened there? Their souls flew out of their body. That's what we read by Matan Torah. And on each dibur, in each and every utterance, the souls flew out, and Hashem put the souls back. And Chassidus understands that that's what the oral Torah tells us. And Chassidus understands that to mean that they were taking something in that they had not yet made themselves a keli for, a vessel for. As a result, they couldn't hold it. So it flew out. Kibbel HaYehudim is the time of Purim, where they actually were able, through the pain and suffering that they had gone through for quite a while, leading up and through and until the Gullus of Persia, they had endured. And through that enduring, they were able to makabel. They became vessels to receive the Torah, to really hold on to it. So he explains, the Frierdiker Rebbe, in that maymor, Shenema B'Purim, Cotton, which was said on Purim Cotton in the year Tov Reish Pei Zayin, he says that the tzivui, this commandment, tetzaveh, utzavto b'chibur. He explains something which has become commonly used all over in Chassidus, but it was coined by the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the word saveh, which means to command, or mitzvah, mitzaveh, mitzvah, to be commanded, cause to be commanded, is a language which expresses savta b'chibur, of connection. And we've had this before in our conversations, in our classes. A mitzvah is not just a commandment, it is. It expresses God's will for what we should do, but in doing so, it becomes a way of us to connect with his supernal will, and his supernal will is embedded deeply in his consciousness, if you could say such a thing. So mitzvah is a language of connection. So with this, we're going to get our first glimpse of understanding in what God said to Moses, Ve'ata tetzaver, you should command. Es b'nei Israel, meaning what? Shemoshe hu hamekasha u'machaber es b'nei Israel im or ein sof. And this line you could underline. You, God is emphasizing you. You, not me, God. You, the Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of the Jewish people, you are the one who ties and joins the children of Israel with me, the Or Ein Sof, at least with my light, my infinite light. I need you, the tzaddik. So here we have a definition of the tzaddik ador. The tzaddik ador is the one who joins the Jewish people with the Or Ein Sof. Ato tetzaveh, you tetzaveh, you tzavta v'hiba, you join them together. And through this, that Moses flows, gives his flow of chayas and teaching to the Jewish people, which means for which when the Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching and giving, back to our handing out this maymor and just giving it into our hands, what he's doing, in the parentheses, is Makasha Oisam, he's tying the Jewish people with the Or Ein Sof. And this is the so-called job of a tzaddik. I remember there are many stories like this, but one of the stories, a group of news reporters was asking the Rebbe. One of them said, "What is your job? What do you do? What do you do?" Now you have to. Not all of you are as old as I am, but in the long time ago, in the dark ages, the telephones were operated by operators. When you dialed a number, or even before that, you told an operator what number you want. That operator would plug in certain electrical connections to make it. And that's what he said. He said, I'm an operator, a telephone operator. I take someone's trying to reach something, I plug it in and make the connection. And he said, that's my job. That's the job of a Rebbe. And that's what explained here. That Shmekasha Oisem Yemein Saborka, the Rebbe's job, Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the seed of all the Rebbes, the Rebbeim, he ties the Jewish people with the Or Ein Sof. And al yedei zeh nasa yisin v'hesofa b'Moshe. And this gets to why it says, bring the oil to you. This is an amazing point, not always said. In doing this, there's something is added to the tzaddik. The tzaddik gets an addition, gets a infusion from making that connection between us and the Or Ein Sof. He says in parentheses, the Moshe Yisrael hem dugmas reish b'regel, because Moses and the Jewish people, these two entities, Moses and the Jewish people, they're compared to a head and a foot. Moses, obviously, the foot, and we're the head. Moses, the head, and we're the foot. Moshe Kosev is written, a posuk, it says, Sheish meis elef ragle ha'am, 600,000 foot soldiers, is literally what it is, but feet of the people, Asher anaychi b'kirboy, which are in my midst. It's a posuk. I can't read the language. It's a pasuk in the philosopher. Okay. The Kol Yisrael hem haraglayim de Moshe. We are the feet of Moshe. This is meant to give us an understanding of what it means that we give him something. What does it mean? We are his hands and feet. So just like the head, he's the head, Rosh, and we're the feet. But the head can't go anywhere without the feet. So we give something to him. We give him the ability to mobilize that which he is desirous of mobilizing in the world. And Moses is the head of all the people. Now he says this pretty much what I've just said. And just like in a person, the feet lead the head to a place where a head can't go on its own. Similarly, Yisrael is the relationship between Moshe, or the tzaddik of the generation, and the Jewish people. Yisrael is through the Jewish people who are the Ragolim Moshe, the feet of Moshe Rabbeinu. It creates literally an elevation in Moses. It creates an ability in Moses that he didn't have without us being his feet, to take him where he wants to go. These are like the shluchim, and we're all shluchei hamakim, right? All of us were messengers of God. That's why we're created here. And so you can say the very similar thing, lahavdil, if you could make a distinction between human and godly, but similar godly. God gives his will into the Torah, and his will is represented by the mitzvahs, which we've learned is connects us with him. And as the Midrash says, when it speaks about the commonality between the word halicha and halacha. Al tiricha halicha ela halacha. Halicha means to go, and halacha is the vehicle that God has given us to go, meaning to bring him into the world. So this works with God and the Jewish people, and it works with Moshe Rabbeinu and the Jewish people as well. So similarly, just like the feet take the head to a place that the head couldn't go on their own, so similarly, Moshe Rabbeinu and the Jewish people, Shadidei Yisrael, through the Jewish people, who are the Ragalim de Moshe, the feet of Moshe, Nisvasef Alei B'Moshe, it creates an improvement in Moshe Rabbeinu. V'zeu Moshe Kosev, as it says, Shoish Moyes Elef Ragle Ha'am, that will come back to our pasuk, 6,000 foot soldiers, or feet of the people, Asher Anoichi Bekir Boy, which I, this is God talking, I am in their midst, through the fact that they bring me into their midst. And this is what he says, Shal Yidei Ragle Ha'am, it's through the feet of the people, Nimshech Hagili de Anoichi, comes the revelation of the one who says, Anoichi. It is I, and it is I alone who invest myself in everything. But how do I invest myself in everything? Through you, my foot soldiers. And that's how I become Bikir Boy Shel Moshe. And that's because it creates a closeness between us and Moshe Rabbeinu. So now we can understand a little bit of the questions we asked at the beginning. It says, Ato Titzaveh. God says, you, Moses, right? Not just Savis ben Israel, leaving out Moses' name. He says, you connect, Es b'nei Israel. You make a connection with the Jewish people, and that will be partly, at least, in that they beyicho alecha shemen zayas, that they bring to you this shemen zayas, this olive oil. So this is now shifting to that topic. Yal yidei sheMoshe yitzaveh. Through this, that Moshe Rabbeinu commands the Akasha es b'nei Yisrael im or Ein Sof, and connects the Jewish people with the Or Ein Sof. Through this, Yaviu b'nei Yisrael shemen zayis l'Moshe. Through this, we are bringing a very pure olive oil to Moshe, to him, sheyesifu hetesefes or b'Moshe. What does it mean? We, through bringing our avodah to the tzaddik, is the one who teaches us how to activate the Torah that God has commanded us, right? I mean, of course, this is true of Gedolim in general, but in every generation, there's a tzaddik ador who is the center of gravity, so to speak, of all the hashpah that's coming into the world. And that center of gravity is meant to inform and enliven us, right? That's the Rebbe. The Rebbe simply is, Rebbe means to teach, right? My kids have a Rebbe in yeshiva. The word Rebbe means somebody who teaches. And the Rebbe of the generation, the Tzaddik Ador, is the one who's teaching, is relevant to ultimately all of humanity, but clearly to all of the Jewish people. And what does it do? That when we take that teaching in hand and we make it really shine, kosis lamoyer, then we give him a big boost. What's the big boost? Well, it says, Shiasifu Taisefes or B'Moshe. We add light to him. It's like a parent getting nachas from a child. All of us are children of the Eibishter. We're the children of the Tzaddik Ador. We owe our life to the teachings that come through the Tzaddik Ador. And when we operationalize those teachings, we give nachas to our parent, to our teacher. And that nachas illuminates his face and gives him an extra power. And that's the idea of taking this oil, not just the ordinary oil, really working this oil till it's really, really refined, really working our connection with the Rebbe, our connection with Torah, our connection with Torah and mitzvahs and Hashem, so that it's really refined. That puts a big smile on the Rebbe's face, ultimately on the face of God, if you could say such a thing. Pause. We're going to start a new ois. Any comments or questions? Go for it.
I wanted to say on simplychassidus.com, they have this entire maymor with the original Hebrew and English and breaking down all the concepts that you're teaching right now. So it's just another way to see what you're saying and understand it.
Okay, good. Maybe they, if you see over there some chidushim, some news, but things that I'm not saying, if you could use this class, certainly have an opportunity to bring them out.
Yeah,
that would be nice. Okay.
Pretty much said what they're saying.
So far, I've said what they're saying. Okay. All right. I mean, so what's the point? Number one. Point number one of this maymor is, and remember, this is the maymor that the Rebbe gave out. Last one he personally examined and gave out. He handed this to us on a plate and said, "Here, you want to know what a Rebbe is about? You want to know what Torah's Moshe is about? You want to know about how the Ein Sof itself relates to you each and every moment? This maymor will tell you," which is a lot of good stuff to know, right? To internalize as we go forward into Ois Gimmel. Okay, now having said all that he said, he feels, this is the Rebbe speaking, that it still needs, we need more explanation. Okay, well, to explain this. So makdim behamayim. So let's first bring something in the beginning of the maymor. What is the beginning of the maymor? Shemoshe Rabbeinu nikra Uraya mehem. Something we need to understand. Who is this Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu is called, in the language of Kabbalah, Uraya mehem, which the usual translation is the faithful shepherd, which, I mean, is a good translation, but we're going to get further into it. I mean, do you remember the story of Moshe Rabbeinu? I mean, I'm sure some of us do. He wasn't interested in this. Moshe Rabbeinu, what motivated Hashem to pick Moshe Rabbeinu up there in Midian, tending the sheep of his father-in-law? Well, that's what motivated him. He saw that Moshe Rabbeinu took care of every single sheep individually. And when a sheep would wander off here, he would lovingly go so that's where he gets the notion from, the shepherd, the faithful shepherd, the one who is faithful to always be there when you need him, right? Of course, later on, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want the mission. He said, look, give the mission, remember this? He said, give the mission to the one who is going to lead all the sheep out of that. Give it to Mashiach. What am I doing here? Even Moshe was pining for Mashiach. But he was the Mashiach of the door. He's the one who, the anointed one is another expression of oil. And he's the one who fed us, literally fed us, as we'll see now, the second meaning of being the faithful shepherd. And he introduces here now. The Shnei Pirushim Bezer. There are two ways of understanding this expression that he was the Raya Mehem. Shuroya Neman Shel Yisrael. He's the faithful shepherd of the Jewish people. We're his sheep, and he's the shepherd of his flock. Now, what does he do? He takes care of the sheep, and part of the sheep, taking care of the sheep, is make sure they have food. Take him to green pastures. He's mefarnes es Yisrael. So Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe, the tzaddik of the generation, the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation, like the original Moshe Rabbeinu, his job is to mefarnes, to sustain the Jewish people. So Raya Mehemnu means that he's faithful to shepherd us, meaning to sustain us. He's Mefanes Yisrael, Be'inin Emuna. He sustains us by feeding us Emuna. God knows we need Emuna. The more the time, the darker the time, the more Emuna. The Hamuna Sheyesh Nabi Yisrael, because the Emuna, we'll just call it faith for the time being, faith that is in the Jewish people, Mitzad Atzman, then everyone is born. We're called Maminim B'nei Maminim. Chazal call us believers, the children of believers. So we all have Emunah invested within us. Now this Emunah that's in the Jewish people on our own, Sheshrol He Maminim B'nei Maminim, which is a quote, let me see where it's from. It's from Gemara Shabbos, okay? So Efshe Tetia B'chinas Makif. It's possible that this Emunah that we have can be kind of all-encompassing, but not internalized, right? I mean, most of us have, even if you're not religious, and even if you don't know about Torah, you have some faith that when you go to sleep at night, the sun will rise in the morning. I mean, you don't know that. It's not a scientific fact. I mean, it's subject to the laws of science, but you take it as, and you're relaxed about it most of the time. And there are some people who are not, but most of the people, most of the time, are kind of relaxed about, I can go to sleep and the sun will shine, right? Okay, that doesn't really influence anything that I do, except that, okay, I'm supposed to get up now, right? Maybe I'll sleep a little bit longer, but I'm supposed to get up now. So, okay. And this is what we say, everyone has this natural emunah in a makiftika way. It's not making a big difference to my life each and every moment. Moshe Rabbeinu fosters, that's another word for shepherd, sustain, fosters, umefarnes, parnasa, right? Parnasa is sustenance. So Moshe Rabbeinu shepherds, meaning guides, and he fosters Israel, the Jewish people, be'inin hu emunah. Hu she'emunah tia be'penimius, so that our emunah will be with penimius. Now, what does it mean that emunah should be with penimius? That we act according to our emunah. We don't necessarily, or even most of the time, act only according to reason or even because of reason. We do things that are totally unreasonable, right? I mean, some simple mitzvahs like keeping kosher, which although there have been attempts historically to say that the reason God gave kosher is because it's not good to eat milk and meat, but that's not the reason. The reason is there is no reason. The reason is God said, don't eat milk nor meat. And we've learned in Chassidus, very importantly, that ultimately all the mitzvahs, even the ones that you do understand, are really hukim. They're hukim. They're from a place that comes from much deeper than rational understanding. So, and we act that way most of the time. I mean, I put on tefillin, right? And you light Shabbos candles, right? And we are taught, and we believe, otherwise we would give it up, that these things are drawing down godliness into the world, or they're sending up messages into the spiritual world, even though we don't see that. This is something we believe. And that's called panemius, meaning that our actions, our thoughts, speech, and actions are aligned with the things that are deep inside of our soul, deeper than reason. This is what's written in the Zohar. This faith from up above, Yazon Yisfarnes, Mene, and that it is fostered, or well, Zon means to be fed and fostered, Al Yodecha, through you, which is through Moshe. So this is the job of the Rebbe. As he said, he makes the connections, right? He takes in this case, our natural emunah, and he strengthens the signal so that it now becomes something panimis that is part of our daily operations. This that Moshe Rabbeinu sustains, fosters, feeds, and sustains emunah. What does it mean by that? He draws it down, he feeds it, he injects it, he infuses it into us in a panemius. This is all said, by the way, and we're not quoting. The Rebbe is bringing us ideas that are all expressed in the maymor of the Frierdiker Rebbe, that Purim maymor we mentioned earlier. And the Rebbe now goes on to say, that the Frierdiker Rebbe goes on, continues in the maymor, and says, this that Moshe is called the faithful shepherd, or the one who shepherds faith, right? Who feeds Emunah. Hakavana b'zeh, the intention is gam l'shpastusha de Moshe b'chol dor. So this is the first time we had it explicit. The Frierdiker Rebbe says this, that Moshe does that. This is embodied in the ishpastusha de Moshe, the inheritor, the one who has inherited the flow of Moshe b'chol dor, in each and every generation. So this is actually said in the Zohar, but the Frierdiker Rebbe brings it out clearly in this maymor. The Reishei Alpha Yisrael shebechol dor, the heads of the thousands of Jewish people which exist in each and every generation, they strengthen the Emunah of Yisrael, shebedoram, of their generation, the tzaddik of the door in each and every door, in each generation. And what does it mean to strengthen? That the Emunah we have should become panemius, part and parcel of our everyday actions. Mordechai was a tzaddik of his door. He was the Moshe Rabbeinu of his door. Shehoya hispashtus the Moshe Rabbeinu, as he says, he was the hispashtus, the receiver of the flow of Moshe Rabbeinu in his generation. And our sages have said, our sages have said in the Talmud that Mordechai in his generation was like Moshe in Moshe's generation. That even in the time when there was the decree of Haman HaRasha, that things were so bad that our doing of Torah mitzvahs were through total Mesiras Nefesh. You could die for this. I mean, wasn't so long ago, this was the same case in Russia, that people would be killed for observing Torah and mitzvahs. So it took total self-sacrifice. So that was true, that the learning of Torah in that generation was connected with ultimately being willing to give up your life, really. Not just coming out of your habitual modes, which is the daily Mesiras Nefesh. I'd rather stay in bed, but no, I've got to get up and put on tefillin, right? Whatever. That's a shtickle Mesiras Nefesh. But we're talking here about real Mesiras Nefesh, giving up your nefesh, your life. Hakil Kahilas. And what did Mordechai do in his generation? He made parades. He Hakil Kahilas. He brought the congregations together, the rabbim. He brought them all to the Farbringen, brought everybody together, in order to strengthen their emunah shel Yisrael, the Havaya in God, and to give them energy to strengthen themselves and to stand tall, to stand strong. In fulfilling the Torah and doing the mitzvahs. After the Frierdiker Rebbe explains at length that there's a Moshe Rabbeinu in each and every generation, Nechazkim es Ha'amunah Yisrael, whose job is to strengthen the Jewish people. So then the Frierdiker Rebbe goes on and explains Mevar, Diak Lashon HaKosev, the precise language of the scripture that he's examining. Shemen, Zayis, Kosis Lamora. This is our pasuk, right? It's olive oil, Kosis Lamora. So Lemora v'lei shememenu nimsa or. This is in parentheses, but it's very important. To illuminate, and not that light should come from it. It's not shememenu nimsa or, but that he should be a illuminator, a lumineroi, a luminary, like the sun. The sun is called a moer, a luminary. It's not just that light comes from it, but it's the source of light. It's the lamor, it's the luminary from which light comes. The Tzorech Lahavin, okay, that he explains that in the Frierdiker Rebbe does in that maymor, That's the meaning of lemoya, not just to be a aura, a ray, but to be a source of light. And he makes the connection that Tzorek Lahavin Hashayf is the Pirish the Kasis Lemoya. What's the connection between becoming a source of light and that it should be beaten finely? Beaten. What's the connection? The Hamavur that's explained, what's the connection between that and what's explained earlier, that Moshe Rabbeinu and the Hispashtusha Delesha B'chol Dor B'Dor and the Hispashtus of Moshe in every generation, Mefarnes as Hamuna. What's the connection between finely beaten, finely distilled, finely refined, right, down to into a, what's the word I want to say, beaten to a pulp doesn't capture it, but just that it has to be very finely ground. Grinding is probably the good word for this. We get ground, don't we? In every exile that we live in, the Jewish people gets grinded by the host culture, right? And there's something about being grinded or ground, whichever the right English word is, that brings out the ability to be not only a source of light, and not only to be one that gives out light, but to be someone who is actually the source of light. And that's
he uses crushed here.
Crushed. Good, thank you. Good word. And so that's the question. How does the being crushed, bring out the ability that we have to become a source of light? That's the idea we're going to deal with next. So we got any questions here so far? So basically, I mean, look where we're holding here. It's hard to say this because I was going to say it's a maymor for our times, but really it's a maymor for any time. Because unfortunately, or according to God's plan, virtually every time that we have been in, with very few exceptions, is a time when we have been crushed, or at least wanted to be crushed by the host culture that we're in. And what we're saying here is that crushing enables us to be a source of light. So that needs to be explained. Okay, so we'll go further. This explanation of the pasuk Atat Tzava, which we're explaining here, comes in the maymor. Behemshech lemavur techila hamaymer. It comes as an extension of that which is said at the beginning of the maymor. The Pirish, this is by the Frierdiker Rebbe's maymor. The Frierdiker Rebbe's maymor on Purim. This is the whole context. I mean, one of the things I have to just say, Derek Aga, that one of the things that was really critical in me developing my own relationship with the Rebbe, and each of you have your own. Well, one of the critical things was realizing that the Rebbe, who's the teacher, has a Rebbe. The Rebbe has a Rebbe, and the Rebbe's Rebbe has a Rebbe, and the Rebbe's Rebbe has a Rebbe, all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, going back further ultimately to Adam Arisha. That this is a chain. And why was that important? Because when I was coming into this, I had seen a lot of so-called gurus, but they were every one of them, no matter even if they preached humility, were full of themselves. And the Rebbe embodied, and I had a number of experiences where I could just see this, that he was really a vessel, not full of himself, but really a receiver. Ispashtusha the Moshe Rabbeinu. He was in the chain of receiving, right? So he's now, if you notice or ever hear the Rebbe's speak, I mean, like now we have recordings of the Rebbe, we have videos of the Rebbe, or if any of you on the call were zoicha to be where the Rebbe was when he was here with us in a body, he would always refer to his father-in-law as the Rebbe de Shver, the Rebbe, my father-in-law. He never referred to himself as a Rebbe. And it never came across as false humility. It came across as genuine humility. So, why did I say that? Because this whole maymor that he's building here is all built on the structure of his father-in-law. And from that respect, he's not saying anything new. And really, all of Chassidus, going back to the Alter Rebbe and back to the Arizal, is not saying anything new. However, it brings news, right? It brings news because it's said in a different way. It's said and brings out something that was latent there but had not really been well internalized or well expressed. So the Rebbe here is constantly going back to his Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and back to his maymor of Kibbul HaYehudi. So on the second line, Ois Dalet. Okay, second line in Ois Dalet. Okay, back to the Frierdiker's maymor. The Pirush, where he explains in his maymor of Kibbul HaYehudim, the Purim maymor, right? They were makabel, they internalized, that's the word that we used before, that which they had received, that which was given to them on Mount Sinai, they began to internalize. Hu shekiblu ma hiskalu v'zaman d'matan Torah. They received, meaning internalized, that which they had begun to do at the time of the giving of the Torah. So let's explore this a little, explode it a little. The Matan Torah, Hoyasa Haschala, was a beginning. Acholu la'asis, the beginning of doing. We were given the mitzvahs. B'yemei Achashverosh, which was the Gezeras Haman, the time of the decree of Haman, Hoyasa HaKabbalah. That's when we received it, internalized it. The Kibbul HaYehudim. I don't know if he's going to, I didn't see this ahead, but Kibbul HaYehudim, we're called Yehudim, right? We're not all from Yehuda. What Mordechai is called, Mordechai HaYehudi, which I'm sure some of you have come across this explanation. He was from the tribe of Benjamin, right? He was from the tribe of Benjamin. Why is he called Yehudi? Because Yehudi means hoid, to admit, to open yourself up, and to be a vessel, a container for a flow. And that means to kibul, to makabel. So Kibbul HaYehudim. So we're called Yehudim, even though we're a lot of different tribes there at the time of the Persian exile. This is a pasuk from the Megillah, that the Jewish people were called Yehudim. They did and they received everything. Kaimu ma shekiblu kavar, and the Chazal say about it, they stood up and stood on that which they had received previously. This that they said we will do back at Matan Torah, we'll do, and then we'll understand by Matan Torah. That's when they got it, right? That's when we heard it and they said, yeah, we'll do it, and then later we'll understand it. They kimu, that's the word. They fastened onto it. They established. They made it permanent. Kiyum. If something has a kiyum, it's going to last. They made lasting that which they had initially received at Mount Sinai. And medayik b'hamay. And again, the Rebbe points out the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe is very specific in his maymor. He says that this is, at first glance, this is a wondrous thing. When we stood, all of us, we were all there, all of our souls were there by Matan Torah. We were at the highest elevation. And we had an experience of the level of godliness was just at the highest levels. So even though before Matan Torah there were great revelations, right? We saw the hand of God coming down and killing all the Egyptians. We had the Red Sea. There were great revelations before. Yeah, even though there were Eslam, Gili, Alakus, Bedaga, Hochinailas, very, very high ones, the noise of Lazeh, Shagam, Kodim, Matan Torah, Hoya Giluyim, Nela, Beyoser, which he says parenthetically, besides the fact that there were very, very great, very high miracles, Hagila Shohoya B'Yatzias Mitzrayim, with the project of Yamsuf, which I mentioned, in the Hagila Shohoya B'Shas Matan Torah, but the revelation that took place at Matan Torah was a Gili Nilam Yoser, was even higher than the splitting of the Red Sea and the Exodus from Egypt, much higher. And at the time of Persia, we're not being lifted on clouds. We're not being, having our enemy die behind us from the hand of God. On the contrary, at the time of the Persian exile, we are in deep, deep galus. We're in the utter state of descent, not ascent. The Naisif le'ahelam ve'ahester should be called galus, in addition to the concealment and the hiding that exists in every exile. And he says, interestingly, paralytically, they're called galus ubedugma, galus Mitzrayim. Every galus that we're in is compared to Mitzrayim. That's why we have a mitzvah, Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. We have to remember the going out of Egypt each and every day, because no matter where we are, no matter what point in history, in some respect, we are in galus, whether it be just personally, or whether it be culturally, but we're in galus. And the root galus is galus Mitzrayim. And just like as it was in the exile of Egypt, it says, because see, it's written, we didn't listen to Moshe because the work was so hard, and we were literally short of breath. We couldn't catch our breath. We couldn't catch a relaxed moment. We were totally under pressure, and the work was very hard. And this is a factor which exists to some extent in each, and I put it in words, to some extent, each and every galus. What is galus? Galus is where there are trials and tribulations, difficulties. And he's not necessarily talking about illness or those kinds of things, God forbid. He's saying clearly, trials and tribulations became a Torah mitzvahs, in fulfilling the Torah and mitzvahs. There's always something, whether it's our own stuff we bring to the table, doubts, other things, counterculture, other ideologies. I mean, the list can go on and on. You don't need me to come out with the things that can interfere with the purity of our connection to godliness all the time. And the Oz then, Bisman Gezeres Haman, at the time when the decree of Haman was upon us, it was even worse. It was even worse. Galus Mitzrayim, remember, we were slaves. We were fed every day. We had shelter every day. It wasn't very fun, but our lives were not being threatened. We were just in slavery. We were alive and healthy to the extent that they fed us and allowed us to sleep as slaves. Very different in Galus of Persia, where our very survival was at stake. So therefore, the Helam Hester then was much greater. The Alpha Pichem, nevertheless, Bisman Matan Torah, at the time of the giving of the Torah, where we stood like free people, right, out in the desert with the hand of God and with the cloud and the pillar of fire and the cloud. We were in a very elevated place. That was just the beginning. And we're saying it was in Persia, under the direst of exile, the worst, that became the place where we were Makabbalah. How does this go together? Would you think, perhaps you might think, that out there where when everything is, when you don't have to struggle, and you're just there, and openly God is handing you all these things, how is it then that we say that we really didn't receive it until we get through this gullus in Persia? And there in the desert, we say when the Torah was given, At Har Sinai, that was only the beginning. Ubizman Gezeres Homin, when in the time of the decrees of Homin, when we were in the ultimate lowest state, that's when we internalized and took as our own everything which we had only begun at Matan Torah. So Mevar Bezeh, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe tells us again, that the Frierdiker Rebbe explains to this, the Bizman HaGezer, at the time of the decree, Hayakima Torah Mitzvah Lahem b'Mesiras Nefesh. This is the key. The opportunity for Mesiras Nefesh was much, much greater in Persia than it was when we were at Har Sinai. So we're coming now to an understanding. He wants to, we'll get deeper in this, that being pushed, I mean, we are very fortunate. Hard to say what I'm about to say, being fortunate, but we are. We are seeing in front of our eyes the IDF soldier whose life is pushed to death, coming to behave in ways that soldier probably never would have thought he would have come to do. By putting on tefillin, saying Shema. I saw a picture recently that was sent of a picture of a big poster of the Rebbe with like this at the front of what looked to be like a tank with a soldier. It almost looked like the soldier whipping the horse, which was the tank, and the Rebbe sitting in front of it. Behavior that's being brought out by what? By Mesiras Nefesh, by being pushed, well, back to our land, being squeezed to the point that we become a source of life. In addition to the fact that we had to give over, we were willing to give up our lives, in order not to deny the mitzvahs, or as explained in the maymor in Torah, or that he says they made bitter their religion, and nevertheless, we didn't, even though they didn't do anything, they just embittered the religion. The Gezerah was only on Yidden. In other words, if you stopped doing this, you would be okay. But as long as you're manifesting your Yehudi, your Jewishness, you're not okay. But nevertheless, in the time of Persia, they could have done that, right? But they didn't. I mean, as a whole, some did, but as a whole, we didn't. Even though that would bring on more affliction, we didn't, because simultaneous to the affliction was the deepening of connection. So there, they were totally, literally willing to give up their lives for Torah mitzvahs. And what did he brought them out in public? He brought them out in public. Children, parents. He gathered them all together, Mordechai did. Berabin, Lilmud Torah b'Mesiras Nefesh, and stood out there in public with total Mesiras Nefesh, teaching and learning Torah. And this arousal of total willing to give over their lives for the sake of godliness, for the sake of the Torah. They were inspired by the Tzaddik Ador to do this, by Mordechai, who was not from the tribe of Yehudi, but who was Yehuda, who expressed in his every pore, every corpuscle of his being, Ador, given over this. Now, I don't want to get personal too much, but to me, that was the Rebbe that we saw physically, and we see in the videos that we have, and who expresses this over and over again. The 150% given overness to his people, the Raya Mehemnon, for the sake of what? As the Rebbe said, when he was a small child, before he entered the first grade, he was obsessed with a vision of Geula. And that stayed with him and got bigger and bigger, and he fed it to us. Not the idea of Geula, the feeling of Geula, the feeling of being unhindered by anything and totally connected with the Torah. Raya Mehem, the one who shepherds our faith. And it's this Hisoros and Mesirus Nefesh of them, Hoysa Adide Mordechai Yehud, who was the Moshe Rabbeinu of his generation. V'zeho v'kibel ha-Yehudim, and this is what it said, they were called Yehudim. They were not called Jews, they were called Yisraelim. They were called Yehudim. As Ashech Echolul says, it was the Mesirus Nefesh that caused them to be, which resulted in them being completely given over. It doesn't matter. I mean, this is the soldier who in any war. My father was in World War II, and he described these things to me. You lose your sense of trepidation about giving up your life, and it's just go. You just go. And what brings you to that is you have to go. You're under pressure. So Matan Torah, there was no pressure. So it's only the beginning. Ubizman Gezeres Homin, there was a lot of pressure. And that's when they were makabelit. Because since they were called upon to give up their lives actually, al Torah mitzvahs, for the sake of Torah mitzvahs, nisalu, they were elevated. The inyan zeh, limedrega nailus yoser, we were elevated to a higher level. A higher level than we were at Matan Torah. Therefore then, and we actually internalized it. I'm stopping here. We're going to continue this, maymor. This is going to be our study for a while, because this is the 30th year. It's interesting, I was just thinking in passing, it's not coincidental that Lamed 30 is the word to teach and to learn, right? Amalamed and Limud and Lamed. So we're going to continue to learn from the Rebbe what a Rebbe is. And we'll continue this next week. But before we sign off, I do want to hear any questions and comments. None? All right, so I'll just say a brucha b'chein for all of us as we go into Gimmel Tammuz. Whether or not you're a carrying Lubavitcher or not, there's something going on here. There's something that's bringing people from all over the world to the kever of the Lubavitcher Rebbe at this time. And I could just say one thing that's going on, we've learned tonight. We've learned that we are drawn to someone who has nothing of their own. We're drawn to someone who is just giving over something that they acquired, and when that acquisition that they're giving over goes back all the way to Adam Arishon and his relationship with God, there's a channel, and people are thirsty to drink water from that channel, and the channel is open, particularly in these next 24 hours, which is the time of the Histalkus. And remember the Histalkus of the Rashbi, right? The tzaddik of his generation. Rashbi is called a Hilula, and the Hilula is a marriage. The soul of the Rebbe, the tzaddik, is going up and having a marriage relationship with Hashem, and we have the opportunity to be by the chuppah and the simcha. So we should take advantage. I don't usually say should, but what can we do? We can take advantage of this amazing Eis Ratzon in the next 24 hours and feel and get more infusion of Emunah. And with that, unless anyone...
Thank you.
Okay, we'll conclude.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And we'll continue. In Mir Hashem. Bye-bye.